Shine.fm presents Stronger Together, a show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. Here's Seth Tower Hurd.
My guest today is Robert Beeson, who started out in life with one role that he could probably have some really cool stories about, and then I think very drastically shifted into a different primary focus. We're talking about single parenting on this particular episode of Stronger Together. So Robert, if you know people get a chance to see the video, you got some platinum plaques on your wall behind you.
Yeah,
I do see that.
And it's kind of embarrassing. Like, I'm like, well, should I focus on just like the bookshelf or whatever? But because I don't want to look all pretentious and stuff. But yes, it was a very fun season.
Oh yeah, I mean, you got to do it, man. I think you should share that with the world. By the way, you can search, if you're listening on the radio, you can search Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube. You can always watch this as video. I think we need just like a little maybe 2-minute summary before we get into single parenting, because you really had a pretty charmed life. I mean, you're sitting there with I can see like 4 gold and platinum plaques behind you. So you had a dream job, man. I mean, you had a family, and I mean, this all sounds pretty good, right? So I think we have to paint that picture before we get into the transition and what you're calling is now.
Sure. So I started at a pretty young age. I started a record company in California and moved out to Nashville, and we achieved some fairly significant success within the Christian music market pretty quickly. Jars of Clay was one of my first signings, and they blew up. And then as things happen in the music business, once something succeeds, then it starts attracting, it becomes a magnet for other artists. And so Third Day and Caveman's Call and eventually Casting Crowns. And, it started rolling. And I was very blessed to have won a bunch of Grammys and a bunch of plaques and accolades that the world would give you. And I had a wife and 3 kids. And I think that the problem is that I wasn't really rooted in my identity. And so I really just started living it up and created some very destructive habits in my life. So even though God was blessing me and there was certainly a lot of what the world would say success internally within our family, there was, I refer to it in my book as like a powder keg that was just waiting to blow. And it did eventually. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
I'm with Robert Beeson. This is Stronger Together, the show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. We are talking about parenthood, in particular, single parenthood. Robert had kind of the world by the string, and then I think we need to get into, at some point, this crashed down pretty quickly, right? So wife, kids, I mean, truly I'm going to go ahead and, you didn't say it like this, so I'm going to say a legendary career. The artists you signed were on stadium tours. And so it's like, and I mean, I've never met you before now, but you probably had a sports car and, got to go to some pretty cool locations. Or if not, you could have afforded a sports car with the success you'd had. And then, boom. Tell me about the crash.
So, like I said, I really lived it up. Life afforded me some very wonderful opportunities and luxuries, I guess you could say. And the problem is that, I really decided to live it up, and that I started chasing the success and the momentum that was created by what we were doing as a label, and started really living it up, neglecting my wife, neglecting my role as a father. Now, you couldn't say from the outside that I wasn't available for my kids because I was very involved. But I think in my mind, my heart and my passion was for the company. And eventually, through a course of events, it's really difficult to kind of compress. But my wife decided after 13 years to leave. And so she walked out and left my girls and I. And even though we had been having problems, and we had been struggling for a few years with various things in our marriage, when it all comes crashing down, when you hit that moment of like, this is it, that proverbial it, I don't think anything can prepare you for that. So it was, I think from the outside, people knowing the problems that we had been having as a family, they may not have been surprised, but it hit me like a ton of bricks.
With Robert Beeson talking single parenthood on this episode of Stronger Together. So the typical story here would normally be if parents divorce, normally the man moves out and gets an apartment and, has kind of a single guy life, but you find yourself in full-time childcare here. And you still got to go to work because I'm guessing your kids eat, which means you got to buy groceries.
Yeah, they do. They do eat. And having 3 girls, the hair care and the beautification expenses can add up. Yeah, it was not the typical story. And I won't get into the details because I don't want to pull in my ex and the things that she struggled with. But let's just say that there were substance abuse issues in our house, and eventually got the best of the situation. And so suffice to say that the court ruled that I should have full-time custody of my daughters, who were 9, 7, and 4 at the time. And their mom was to have supervised visitation. It's not the norm. It is definitely not the norm, but it threw me into a world of parenting that I was ill prepared for. But actually through the process found it to be one of the most transformational and important seasons of my life. Okay,
so I'm guessing you got a lot closer to God real quick, and your prayer life got a lot better real quick, right? Because you transition into, a second full-time job, essentially.
It really is. The life of a single parent, or I call them solo parents, it's overwhelming because the bottom drops out. You are meant to be 2 parents. When you feel like less than one, you're dealing with your own, like just juggling lawyers and bills and, the voices in your head that said you're not enough and, you're a failure and all these things. And so you are absolutely put into the place where I say in the book, like either you choose to define the season or this season will define you. And so I made some deliberate efforts to really connect in a way that I hadn't before with God. And so my prayer life went from something that I did or something that I practiced into basically real-time conversations with my Father that were just, to say that it elevated my life would be an understatement. It was really like walking with someone. And when I say that my life was transformed, I think that's a paramount part of it, is that God revealed himself to me. And I think God reveals himself to anyone that is willing to, either by choice or, unfortunately, in solo parents' cases, not by choice, have the roles and the identities that we prop ourselves up with stripped away. And so when I found myself at the same time as losing my wife, I had not signed my contract with Provident, not renewed. I wanted to start a company again. And so within a 6-month period, I was out of work. And my wife left, and I was a full-time father trying to start again. And so I really was forced into this place of figuring out who I was.
And before we talk about the parenting thing, how did you deal with you there? Like, how did you find out who you were, what your real identity was once everything was stripped away?
Well, I don't know that it was something that I didn't read a book and discover, oh, that's who I am. I think what happened is I just spent time every day seeking God. And that didn't look like just sitting in my chair and reading a devotional and praying. It really was trying to be quiet. It says, be still and know that I'm God. Be still is something that you do. You have to be proactively. Be still. And so every single day, and no exaggeration, I would spend 10 to 15 minutes just going in my room and quieting myself and getting into kind of this practice of meditation. And I think it gets a really bad rap in our Christian culture and thinking it's new age and that kind of thing. But if we can just focus on our breathing and start focusing on who God is and his presence, he meets us in those quiet, still places. And the truth is that when you get still and when you get quiet, there is a knowing, as it says in the Bible, there's a knowing that goes beyond anything that you can comprehend or understand by words. And so that became my strength in that period of time. And I started understanding my identity was not even who I was. It was whose I was. And I think that's thrown around a lot, lightly in Christian circles, like, well, you are a child of the King. But when everything else is stripped away, you realize the significance of what that means, that the creator of the universe has called you by name. And so that started building a strength in me that I had never encountered before.
We're with Robert Beeson. This is Stronger Together, the show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. Robert had this charmed life, charmed career where he was the guy that signed and brought out into the world a lot of your favorite Christian bands and helped sell millions of records and had this amazing life. And then his wife left, and he wound up being a single parent of 3 daughters. Okay, I do want to check in on how we can help somebody that finds themselves in a situation like you were, because actually, believe it or not, I'm 35. I have not had one friend in, even kind of close friend get divorced or become a single parent in that area. And I don't know if that's just atypical or if I just am, abnormal or whatever. But most people listening are not going to be, in a situation where they're where you are at right now. My world has fell apart. I'm raising kids by myself, but I bet there's somebody at church. I bet there's somebody in the neighborhood. I bet there's somebody at Little League who's going through that right now. What do you want somebody to know about helping somebody like you? And especially because the person that you may go help may not be a Christian. This may be an amazing witness opportunity.
That's so true. I'm really glad you asked that question. It's a great one. 1 out of every 3 families in America, according to the U.S. Census, is a single parent at home. So I promise you, I guarantee you, a single parent. They may not be your immediate friends. They may not be your immediate family. But 1/3 of our population, 1/3 of the households in America are single parented homes. Here's the thing about single parents. We don't want to reach out for help. We already feel kicked down, damaged, alone, overwhelmed. And to recognize our weakness and to basically broadcast that by going to someone and saying, hey, I need help, feels like just another blow to our ego, to whatever it is. And so more than likely, there is somebody that a Christian out there listening knows that is a single parent, and that parent is not going to ask you for help. And so as a body of Christ, I believe that this call for us to reach out to single parents is very much what the Bible talks about in serving the widows and orphans of today. These are fractured families. These are kids that have been thrown into this disarray, and they didn't have a choice in this. And often the parents did, or the parent may have gotten out of an abusive situation, whatever it is, whatever caused the damage, whatever created this scenario. The truth is that these are souls that are living in a broken state. And they really need help. They don't need help in the sense of, here, let me tell you what to do to correct you. They need help in the sense of saying, I see you, I recognize that you're struggling, and I'll do whatever I can to help. And so some of the things that might look like is just very simple. Like, can I offer to pick up your kids from school? Can I, I'm going to the grocery store. Can I pick anything up for you? I think the most important thing that somebody who is not a single parent can do for a single parent is to let them know that you see them, you acknowledge them, and that you respect them for what they're carrying, because they are carrying a tremendous amount. The reason that I call it solo parent is because I believe we have created this idea in our culture that single parenting is just another norm, but it's not normal at all. It is not the way God intended for this to be. And so I don't look at it as single parents. I look at it as solo parents. Single is a status, solo is a condition. And this is a condition that if we embrace and if we help single parents, it can be a transformational season. I'll give you one example. When I was a single parent, and this rocked my world, a youth group here locally in Nashville, they didn't ask if they could come and help me. They told me that they were going to help me. And what they did is they said, on this Saturday, we are going to take your girls out and get them pedicures and manicures. And while that's happening, you go and do whatever you want to do, because the rest of the youth group is going to clean your house from the top to the bottom. And I never asked for that. I never would have asked for that. In fact, it was kind of embarrassing, but it was a way that the church, served me that made me feel, wow, somebody sees the struggle that I'm in. And so my encouragement for people out there that is to identify a single parent, 1 or 2, and start making deliberate efforts to do the very small things. I don't care if it's a gift card for McDonald's. Anything counts. And when you reach out to them, reach out in a way that's honoring to them, in the sense of like, I don't know if I could do what you do, and I just want to let you know you inspire me and I want to help. That will go a huge way. I'll give you another just quick example. We started the Solo Parent Society support groups at our church here. We were at capacity at complete capacity within 1 week of starting these groups, and it was never mentioned from the pulpit. Now, here's the wacky thing: 30% of the people that came to the Solo Parent Society groups didn't attend the church. So what that says to me is there is a massive need out there of hurting, broken people that need to be embraced by the church that aren't currently going to church. In fact, the statistics are that 67% of single parents don't attend church because they don't feel like they belong and they feel judged. And I think it's up to us as a church to change that conversation.
Wow. We're with Robert Beeson talking about solo parenting. This is Stronger Together, the show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. I'm going to ask something pretty personal here, and this may get me in trouble. I gotta say, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not any kind of parenting expert or a professional. My wife and I are having our first in October, so I haven't done any of it yet. But I do come from a single parent home later in my teen years, and I've seen a number of single parents want to have that other kind of that gap filled, right?
Yeah.
For their kids. And, I may get sued for libel at some point for telling my story, but it's true. I'm actually in touch for the first time in years with my grandmother and one uncle that I really felt God just put it on my heart to, reach out to after probably the better part of 10 to 15 years of not seeing them. They don't even want me to see my dad. If you were to interview, if you were to go talk to my dad, I bet he would probably say I'm probably the worst thing that ever happened to him. And so I've seen single parents say, "Oh man, I just wish the other parent would engage." And I have, on a personal level, said I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you that the people who stepped in kind of male role model type of situations were way better than than my biological father. And, the best thing that happened to me was when he lost interest and kind of quit coming around. That was the best thing that happened to me. Again, we might get some emails over this because this is fairly controversial. And I don't think a lot of people are going to say that on Christian radio, but what do you say? What do you say to that?
Well, unfortunately, our situation was similar at home. The girl's mom had made some life choices that were destructive. And as heartbreaking as it was, she had little involvement. She has had little involvement for the last 10 years in their lives. And I really have wrestled with this. Like, I really thought, well, should I let her get more involved? And, because she'll reach out or try to sue me and take me to court and to change the way things are. But if there's a toxic situation, and I'm not just talking about an inconvenience, and I'm not just talking about this one parent is, not as strict. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about either abusive, belittling, whatever that abuse might look like, or substance abuse, or any kind of thing like that. As hard as this is to say, I believe that it is in the best interest of the kids to not be exposed to that on a daily basis. We had to make some very difficult decisions. Ultimately, the court ruled in my case, and the girl's mom was not involved. And as I look back, I can see the problems that created. But I can also tell you that God showed up. Because just like you're talking about, I had some amazing women friends that were not romantic. It wasn't that kind of thing, but they stepped up. God provided just the right things to nurture my girls. There's definitely wounds that need to be healed with my girls, and not having a mom for a majority of their life, daily active in their lives. But I have to say that God redeemed that situation and brought women, because I prayed specifically that he would bring good role models, and he did. So as difficult as what you're talking about is to talk about, sometimes, and I mean, again, I'm not saying don't use this as a weapon against your ex at all, because your kids are not going through a divorce. They are still family with that other person, with their parent. You may get divorced and you may not be the same family line, but your kids always will be. So be very careful when you handle this. But I'm just saying that sometimes it is probably, like you said, the best thing to not have an ongoing dynamic relationship with someone that is in a really unhealthy place.
Yeah. And I'm not I just want to say one more time, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert. I can only speak to my own experience, and that just happened to be my experience. And I really felt like I had
The
to say
same
something
here,
about
and
that.
let me qualify that too. I'm not a professional, but I'm telling you from my experience, that's what we encountered, and the court sided with that as well. So it's just every situation is difficult. I will say this: that if you are thinking that might be the case, seek professional help. Like, get other people to give their opinions, because when you are in the throes of something as tumultuous as divorce, you are not always thinking correctly. So get counsel. Don't just make that kind of decision on your own.
With Robert Beeson, who actually we could do a whole nother episode with this guy, because he brought some of your favorite Christian bands into the world, and then in a very sudden fashion found himself as the single father of 3 girls. This is Stronger Together. It's a show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationship, and community. I do want to ask you, what kind of questions or what kind of struggles did your daughters go through? And how did you see God and others help you to answer those questions and to bring in, to bring some resolution to some of those struggles?
I think the thing that parents want to, or that kids are feeling that they need some resolution to, is, what does this mean for us? Now that we're not a nuclear family, what does it mean that mom doesn't live with us anymore? Is life going to be normal? Are we ever going to be the same again? And so those are more the questions, more about stability and more about the technical side of things. Like, some people going through divorce, the kids are asking, am I going to spend time with my mom? Am I going to spend time with my dad? Do I have a room over here? So it's really important. And I've had the advantage to have a podcast, and I interview a lot of experts in this field. And the psychologists that I have talked to have said, make sure that you deal with the specifics that your kids are wanting to know. They're wanting to know, are they going to have a room in both places? What are the parameters? Are they going to spend X amount of days here and then come back here? And what is the new normal? So for me and the girls, I think those were the primary things. It wasn't even the big emotional, did mom do this? Did dad do that? It's more about the technical side of, what does this mean specifically for me? What is my new normal?
This is Stronger Together with Robert Beeson, talking about solo parenting. And of course, you speak a lot to, the individual healing of somebody that defines himself as a solo parent, like you were going through, right?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I think about the number of people who listen to Shine.fm and the number of churches that are represented. And I think that, like, just people hearing this episode could do some crazy cool things just by stepping out and saying, okay, I might go to a church of 10,000, I might go to a church of 70, but there's something I've got here that I can share, that I can be of help. And maybe I feel called to do something beyond just befriend somebody. What are bigger steps that churches can take?
Well, we've launched, in fact, we're launching this month, along with my book, the Solo Parent Society. We've been piloting a support group at my church for the last year, and it's just been transformational in our community. And so we've created a program that churches can duplicate where they're at. They don't need to have a pastor lead it. They just need to it is basically creating a community where single parents feel like they belong. And so once a week we get together and we have guidebooks and a facilitator guide that just processes through 13 different topics. And it's scripturally based. It has a lot to do with the issues and the topics that single parents deal with. But I think probably the bigger thing that has been an outreach for the single parents in our community is just collectively bringing them together so they can process life together. So my encouragement to churches is to look for something like we're doing. I don't think there's anything else like it. Divorce care deals with the triage of actually going through divorce. Solo Parent Society, our groups, these kits enable churches to have an easy on-ramp to bring single parents and their families into their family. We kind of look at the Solo Parent Society as basically it is a family of families. And so if you can bring these people together and basically let them process life together through a guided scriptural template, it is transformational. And so that is one very easy thing. It doesn't matter if it's a large church or a small church. There are different formats that we're providing. And so you can find that information on our website. But besides the little things that the churches can do, like cleaning people's houses or home maintenance or mowing lawns or whatever, really tell single parents that you see them and that you value them. And so you're going to build a place where they can safely process through this together.
This is Stronger Together. It's a show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. We've been talking about solo parenting with Robert Beeson, who could maybe we'll have him back to talk about all the Christian artists that you love that he helped bring out into the world. And then he found himself as a solo parent very suddenly, the father to 3 daughters, doing full-time care. Let's close this out on talking about calling, okay? Because you probably could have. This is what you do now. You help solo parents, right?
Yeah.
Like I said in the beginning of the episode, if you're listening to this on the radio, you can always go check out the video. Search Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube. Behind you, gold and platinum plaques. You lived a literal rock star life. Your artists were on stadium tours, as we said at the beginning of the episode. You could have gone and done that again, I'm sure. But instead, you chose something with a lot less like flash and sizzle, which is helping solo parents and helping the church and helping us come to this table to, be Christ to people who could use a little extra help. So when did you know what your calling was? Because this just isn't as cool of a job, right?
Yeah, no, it's not quite as sexy as a job. But here's the thing, like God puts something in our lives that is part of our story. I think the most important thing that we can be looking for related to calling, and certainly is what happened to me, is finding those things that God uniquely has done in your life and things that he's exposed you to. For me, it was becoming a single parent and understanding the power of God's intimate pursuit of me. And I wouldn't have known that if things had not collapsed. So my calling for serving single parents came out of a transformation that happened in my life. Similarly, there are people out there that have gone through something. It may be divorce. It may be, a financial collapse. Ask God to show you what that passionate thing. We're in a process. We are in a series at our church in Nehemiah and talking about finding that calling and finding what it is that God has uniquely put in your life. And so for me, it was solo parent and helping people understand that there is actually strength and transformation that can happen in the season that came out of my own season.
And I'm just going to loop this back as we close out with Robert Beeson. This is Stronger Together, the show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationship, and community. You talked about some of the most transformational moments in your life, doing that thing that we see in Scripture, but not many of us do, including myself, where you say you're just still, 15 minutes of just shutting down, silence, no phone, no TV on, no radio. When you found what it is that you're supposed to be doing in this season of your life, how much of finding that was in those really, truly quiet moments?
I would say 90% of it was in the quiet moments when we are not trying to be clever. We are not trying to role play with God. When we are just quiet and he is helping us understand whose we are, that his love for us is intimate and powerful. That doesn't happen by me speaking. It happens by me shutting up and being still and understanding that the God of the universe, my name is on the lips of the God of the universe. There is something incredibly powerful about that. And things can be born in that stillness that are absolutely bigger and more significant. Certainly for me, it's more significant than anything I've ever done in my life, that I've ever tried to do, is what God revealed to me in those times of stillness.
We've been with Robert Beeson. His new book is called Going Solo, Hope for Healing for the Single Mom or Dad. Hey, if you missed any part of this episode, you can always go back and check out the video by searching Shine.fm on Facebook or YouTube, or you can search Shine.fm podcasts wherever you subscribe to audio. And speaking of podcasts, Robert, you've actually got your own, so if you could shout out that, and then also how individuals and churches can get involved.
Sure. So you can find out all the information on soloparentsociety.com. We have all of our podcasts there. We're on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and whatever the podcast is. And basically that is for single parents. It is interviews with experts in the field. And it's also short versions. We have 30-minute versions and then we have 5-minute versions, which are basically just, I call it the real quick show. And it's just basically taking little topics at a time and helping give single parents some hope. As far as starting the groups, that's all on soloparentsociety.com. We have kits available, introductory kits that are just really, really simple to do. So I would encourage anyone that wants to either help a single parent or is a single parent to check us out.
This is Shine.fm.
That was Stronger Together, a show about growing in marriage, parenting, relationships, and community. Subscribe to the Shine.fm podcast to catch every episode of Stronger Together, available on the iTunes podcast app and wherever podcasts are available.